So this is the first time I've ever shared a story with any of the narrators I listen to at night for my bedtime stories. This story is 100% true, and it takes place in Cincinnati, Ohio, specifically Claremont County. So I'm a female, I'm 31 years young now, and this happened in 2006, so at the time I was 17 going on 18. My boyfriend we will call M, my friend we will call A, and her boyfriend now husband we will call N are the ones involved in this unexplained event. So for some background first, there's this abandoned cabin in the middle of the woods, and you can only get to it by walking about a mile one way. There are abandoned cars, an ambulance, some tractors, and other random vehicles like a short school bus, and they're all covered in gunshots. There's not even a path to drive a vehicle back there. If there was, we would be walking a mile one way to get there, so we're not sure how they even got there or how long they've been there. My boyfriend and I had gone with two other friends previous to our encounter, and it was creepy, but not compared to what happened when we went with A and N. So on our previous trip we went with our friends T and J. T and myself went upstairs and had a Ouija board. We just asked random stupid questions I can't even remember. What I do remember is it spelled out hooey. We said goodbye on the board and was looking around the upstairs, which was really just an attic. We found massive kids' socks in the wall. It was really random and weird. We got startled when an alarm clock started ticking. It wouldn't stop, so I smashed it to pieces, and that was that. We walked downstairs where the boys were and made our way back outside. We found a creepy well that was covered up, and then all of a sudden we heard that alarm clock start ticking again, but I know I had broken it, so that kinda spooked us, but nothing major. We saw an outdoor cellar. We went in, and there was a girl's child boot with a bone inside the shoe, so I was like, okay, we're done for today, let's go. So my boyfriend and myself were telling A and N about this cabin and what happened when T and J came with us. So we decided we were going to go later that day. So the day this encounter happened, M, N, A, and myself went to the lake, packed a cooler with food and crap, and spent probably 5 hours or so at the lake and ate and just hung out. We left the lake, stopped at A and N's house, dropped the cooler off, which was in the trunk of the car. This is important for later in the story. After getting everything out of the trunk from our lake trip, we headed to my boyfriend's parents' house, where we parked the car and began our hour walk. We had flashlights, and that was it. The walk there was very uneventful. We have to walk though too, huge drainage tunnel to get to this cabin as well. So we make it there, and it wasn't dark out, but it seemed different this time. I'm not sure how to really explain it, but it was just different. But we did come later in the day than previously, so I was like, okay, whatever. Just like last time when we get inside, A and myself was going to go upstairs. I wanted to show her the socks in the wall, and I also wanted to check on that clock I broke last visit that I heard ticking outside previously. As we start to go up the stairs, there was a big crash, like something was thrown or knocked over. A gets freaked out, and then out of nowhere she books it outside back down to the creek, yelling at M, N, and myself to come on. I go chasing after her, and she's in tears, having a full-blown panic attack, saying something. Finally I get that she saw someone looking in the window at us. We tell the guys, and literally nobody is around, only the four of us. Since she's so distraught, we decide to go ahead and leave. So as we're walking back down the creek bed, heading back the same way we came, which is the only way there, M and N are kicking over these huge rocks. We stop and realize there are huge rocks, I'd say boulders, standing right up in a line the entire way down the creek bed. They couldn't have been there not even 20 minutes prior, because we'd have noticed them as we were now. So this seriously freaked all of us out. This is not normal, and this is not natural. So we pick up the pace and start to haul us out of there. We make it to the first drainage tunnel, and we turn on our flashlights. Literally none of them will turn on. For flashlights that worked perfectly fine on the way there, and now none of them will turn on. Holy shit! What is happening? So 30 minutes later we're back at my boyfriend's parents' house, where A and N car is parked. A gets in the car because at this point she's ready to go the fuck home and forget this event ever happened. The rest of us are still outside the car. A suddenly gets out of the car screaming and jumping up and down and flaying around. She is covered in ants. We are like, what the actual fuck is going on? So we look, and they're coming from the back seat, from the trunk. N opens the trunk of his car, and laying in the trunk is this huge, rusty, extremely old wolf sock covered in ants. Now remember what I said earlier in the story? We had been in and out of that trunk all day long, and there was nothing in the trunk when we left their house from dropping off the cooler. Now there is a fucking wool sock covered in ants that covered their car. This was too much for any of us to even wrap our heads around. Needless to say, we've never been back there, and I personally will never go back there. So it turns out the man who used to live in that cabin was named Hubert, and he was often called Huey. My BF had actually been to the cabin once before I ever went, and he found these journals there. The man was an alleged child molester. His journals went into detail about his urges and ECT. I'm not going to go into that too much. But again, this story is 100% true, and it was honestly the one and only time I've ever encountered something like this. I will never go back to that cabin. Ever. Even to this day, talking about it, and right now I have goosebumps. I can't explain what happened that day. I have no idea what I saw that scared her so bad in the window. But I do know boulders do not stand straight up on their own in a line, and nobody could have done it so fast to scare us. Nobody could have messed with our 4 flashlights, and nobody could have put that old dirty ant-infested wool sock in a and N car trunk. If you ever are wandering through the woods and come across a random cabin, just leave it alone. You never know who lived there, what they did, and who or what may still be there. Unfortunately, I learned that the very hard and unsettling way. Thank you for taking the time to read my story and hopefully sharing it. This happened when I was just 12 years old, and might take some backstory for it to make sense. So, at the time, I was a young girl about to start high school. Now I had some anxiety from the stress of changing schools and some family trouble, which didn't make things any easier for me. So, my mother is from Nova Scotia and my father is from Europe. We were staying in a cabin in Nova Scotia. I won't say exactly where, but it was a place where we stayed almost every summer, so I was used to sleeping there. This cabin is located on the water, with another property on one side, and a patch of forest on the other. This happened one day in August, but I can't seem to remember the exact date. At the time, my father was away for the night to visit a friend, so it was just me, my twin sister, who we'll just call Annabelle, my little brother, we'll call him Thomas, and my mother, Amanda, of course, not their real names. So, I was listening to something on my iPad, I don't remember what, and looking out the window at the forest. For the longest time, it was just forest, nothing for me to be alarmed about. But after an hour or so, I saw something in the woods. At first I thought it was just the reflection of car headlights on the leaves, but when I kept looking at it, I realized that they were eyes, 2 large, gray, oval-shaped eyes. I didn't know what to do at first, I was paralyzed. I slowly walked away from the window, and the eyes shifted their gaze, as whatever it was disappeared into the woods. I was shaken but decided not to tell anyone, and tried to rationalize it as just being reflection, as I had thought before. I didn't see anything else for the rest of the night, but the next morning is when I really got a scare. I was sleeping in a room with my brother and my mother, while my sister slept down the hall. It was very hot, so I was having trouble sleeping. At around 4 o'clock in the morning, I had a dream. It was one of those dreams where you are just running, but you don't really know why, except, this time I did know what I was running from. I didn't even need to look back to know what I was running from. It was the creature from the woods, and it was chasing me on all fours, from the sound of it. The dream only lasted a few seconds, but the worst part was when I woke up. My heart was beating faster than it ever had before, and I couldn't open my eyes. No matter how hard I tried, it felt as though something was holding them closed. All I could hear was my heart beating, but I could also hear this other sound. It sounded like heavy, raspy breath, mixed with shrill screaming. After about 15 seconds, that felt like 15 minutes, I could open my eyes again, but I almost wish I hadn't. When I opened my eyes, I saw a tall, 7-foot-tall creature slowly going out the door of the room. The creature's skin was a light gray, and looked not scaly, but almost like that of a frog. Its mouth stretched across its face, and when it opened its mouth, it opened much wider than any human could. It didn't look at me as it walked out of the room, and I just stared at it as it walked down the stairs, and right through the locked front door. I didn't sleep much after that, and in the morning, I decided not to tell my family about it, since they did not see or hear the creature, and I did not want them to think I was insane. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but this was not the last time I saw that creature. Later that summer, we were back in our apartment. Now, our apartment looks over a street with 6 lanes, so there's almost always at least one car on that stretch of road, even late at night. So the night this took place, it was around 11 o'clock at night, and I was the only one in our living room. I was going to go to bed, when I noticed something unusual outside my window. The street outside was completely empty, not even a parked car, but what I did see still makes me shudder whenever I think about it. The creature from the cabin was slowly walking down the road. At first it just walked down the road, then it stopped. Slowly, and to my horror, it turned its head up to make eye contact with me. Our apartment building has many levels, and it was at least 60 feet from our building. It met my eyes exactly. This lasted for about 5 seconds, then, it looked away and I ran to my bed as fast as I could. To this day I still do not know what I saw those 2 nights, and if anyone has any idea what I saw, please let me know. I haven't seen this creature since, and hope I never see anything like that again. My name is Mickey and I am a 17-year-old male. I live in a small town with a lot of forest and woods, so it's pretty common to see hunters out and around town with their gear. Hunting's pretty big in our town, and with that comes a few days off early in the school year just for kids to go hunting with their family. Me telling you all this will make more sense pretty soon and will help you make do of our situation. So about a year ago I was with a small group of close friends named Ethan, Zach, and Josh. Since our town's so boring, we have to make do with what we have, and that leads to more illegal activities like exploring abandoned buildings, since our town has a lot of those. It was getting pretty dark out and all of us decided to leave Zach's house and go to an abandoned cabin in the woods that our friend earlier that day was telling us about. We texted him and got the address, and unfortunately he could not go with us that night, but told us it's a pretty steep, muddy walk up through the woods to get there, so we're bad shoes. With that info we drove about 20 minutes out into the countryside of the town, so no cars were really coming past us at this point, and luckily got to the destination as our phones lost service right at this point. We found a good place to park on the side of the road and tread our way up the steep hill. Our friend was right, and it took us a while to get up, but the walk was worth it because ahead of us was a beautiful cabin with custom wooden carved statues out in front of the house and a unique copper roofing. Any first analysis made me think this was a vacation home because of the size of the structure, but was too torn up on the side of the house to be anything at this point. I wouldn't say the building could be called abandoned because all it needed was a little renovation to be good as new. Of course we weren't going to pass up on such a location to explore and walk through the broken wall to get in. It led us to the inside main living room, which without context of the outer house you would think was a hotel lobby. We turned on our phone flashlights because it had gotten darker outside and didn't help the inside's interior lighting. We took videos and Snapchats of the place and made our way to the basement after Zach called us to it. We all were a bit jumpy and nervous at this point, but had to see what was down there. I couldn't explain why I felt so anxious because the place didn't give off horror movie vibes, but something about the chilling coldness of the basement seeping through the bottom of the door was very odd, especially since it was so warm outside. After a bit of arguing over whether we should leave the door closed and move on our way, we decided to open it. Ethan was the one to man up and slowly edge the door open. We all got instantly quieter and started to slowly push each other down the steps. It was very dark, but a green glowing light around the corner wall of the steps was flickering in and out. I was leading the group, and as I go to turn my head to see what was down there, a huge stomping sound charges me, and I flip my head around and I scream to run. We all bolt up the steps and hear stomping behind us. We run to the hill, and as I get ready to dip down the hill, Zach drops down and stares at the house. Whoever was behind us was not behind us anymore, and I drop beside Zach, Dalton, and Ethan. In a normal situation people would leave, but as I said before, this town is very boring and we never get to have this much going on in our life. It was so dark that the person could not have seen us, which was good, but also bad because we wouldn't be able to see them. We lay there in silence for a moment and stare at the house. We all hold our breath as we hear something scraping the wood inside the house. A man comes out dragging something in a large trash bag. It could have been a body, but Zach said it could be a deer. Me and Ethan, being how we were, instantly assumed it was a body. The man seemed in a hurry and dragged whatever was in the bag onto a four-wheeler, which we didn't notice earlier at the front of the house. What was strange though is when he turned the lights on, the vehicle in front of it on the road was a tremendous amount of blood covering the pavement and looked as if something was dragged across it to create the blood trail. And as he drove away, I got a better look at the bag and noticed it could not have been a deer because it was too small and extended farther outwards instead of more large scale like an animal would be. After watching all this went down, we went back down to the car and went home. About a year later, we don't think about it much, but it was recently brought up in a conversation with kids at school, and no one believes us after all of us swearing it happened. We didn't end up telling parents or police about this situation because the fear of getting in trouble, and none of this did really amount to anything other than us getting scared, but I wanted to share this experience to see what everyone else thinks about it.